Today we're talking about the tools located here on the kind of the middle of the toolbar. Once a form is created, you're kind of in the middle of a drill. That's when you're probably going to start to use these because they help aid in transitioning already created forms, whereas these are made more for creation. So this is what's called the push tool. And the push tool just allows you to move ranks and whole groups of people in directions in kind of a unison direction. So you can go left to right, forward to backwards. You can use your mouse to move them, or you can move the arrow keys. So this would be just, you can drag them and it moves the whole group. It doesn't really change the shape of the form, but it's really great for, like it says, pushing a form forwards or pushing a form to the right, and is meant for, straight line paths where everyone moves in unison. Pretty standard. There's a couple little things up here that you can do. You can, if you just wanted them to move 8 to 5, you can put 8 to 5 in, tell them what direction you want to go. Just, if you want to lock that in, you can have it go by distance, that sort of thing. So the push tool is pretty straightforward. The next one we're going to go on to is the Morph tool. And the Morph tool kind of works in my workflow as a way to fine-tune a form. So let's say this line moves to a very, very cool looking curvilinear form. Let's put the interval at 3, accept that. Now what you can use the Morph tool to do is kind of fine tune this. So after the form is created, you select it, click the Morph tool. Now you can pick maybe I like to pick a smaller resolution for steps. And then I delete half of my handles by clicking here, and then I can kind of smooth this form out without changing most of the endpoints. So the endpoints stay the same. I can fine tune this. I can move it, kind of wherever I want and make it look great. If you were really married to that 3-step interval and you want it to be perfect, I'll hit revert here. You just hit lock intervals and it will not let the interval stray from 3 steps. And you'll notice the endpoint here will kind of come back because we've locked the interval. So however we move it, it will change the endpoint. So it's kind of a nice tool for fine-tuning forms. It's a nice tool for when you've had to rewrite a form. Let's say you had somebody quit. You could say, all right, well, that person was this. You delete them. You just kind of go through here and you can equalize the interval. So here's page 2. Here's where that person was. As long as everybody's glued together correctly, you can use the Morph tool. All you got to do is move 1 point. And usually it will keep the form, but it will open up the space for everybody and equalize it. So the Morph tool is good for a lot of different things, but mainly I use it for fine-tuning my forms. The next tool we're going to use is called the Resize editing tool. So we've got a little block here in the center, or a block-ish type form. And selecting this allows you to modify a lot of different things. You can start with scale. Scale makes everything get bigger or smaller from a center point. So here's your center point. As you go out, it expands. As you go in, it contracts. Okay? So scale will move, everything opens up equally from a center point, which can be useful for expanding and contracting forms. There's stretch, where it depends on which handle you move. The other handles will stay selected. So this is good for when forms need to compress, but in just one direction as opposed to from the center. And this is good for things just like this. Say you wanted that block to go from an 8-step left to right to a 4-step left to right. You can use the stretch tool. Stretch tool is useful. I use it quite a bit just because I like to keep things on the grid. Sometimes scale, you don't quite get everybody on the grid and you have to end up going back and putting them on the grid anyway. So scale is useful. So there's slant, and slant allows you to skew forms, where you push them this way, and the bottoms hold, and you can make different cover downs. Even after you've done the slant tool, you can use your arrow keys, move the form around, forward or backward. And slant is really useful for those times where you want to have kind of that pinwheel or that rotation, and you get the cover down of interval. And then there's distort, and distort literally just means you pick your corners and you can move them in any direction and distort the image. So this is a great tool, whether you use scale, stretch, slant, or distort. There's quite a few options packed into this one tool. So next up is this fixed interval float editing tool. Now I've tried many different ways to use this, and I still can't get it to do what I think it's meant to do. So I'll just show you a little bit about what I mean. Let me put this back to a straight line. I am under the assumption that this tool can help you to create curvilinear forms that move and keep a fixed interval. Maybe I'm wrong with that, so somebody can correct me. So I've got an arc at a 3-step interval here, and I want this arc to move around to another arc. Let's just keep it simple. But it does a bit of flexing. Now I'm under the assumption that this tool could help to modify so that we don't get this rub over here where these intervals get smaller. So I'm going to try to do that and then click the fixed interval float editing tool. But you see some of the pathways kind of go crazy. So as I move this around the form, it seems to get better. But you can see sometimes you don't necessarily get the result you're looking for. So you kind of have to kind of hunt around. Let's see, that looks like it could do it. Let's try that and play that one. But if you notice, this guy right here is definitely not taking the right kind of path. Now it gets most of the performers, looks like it keeps the interval a 3-step the whole time, but there is still some work to do here on the form. Now you could always use that and then just go to your adjuster tool, select this guy, and then come around and create that form. But that's kind of what I thought the tool was meant to do anyway. I think it's definitely a tool. There's got to be somebody out there probably that can use it a little bit better than me, but I don't really have too big of a use for it at this time. All right, so now we're in a block form, and we're going to use the rotate tool. The rotate tool is quite simple. You can rotate by degrees, or you can just grab a corner and spin the form around. The thing that this is going to do that's different than if you just charted another block form is that this will create a curved path. So say you wanted to rotate this 45 degrees. You'd type 45 in and it would go. Or you could do -45 and it would go the other way. So using positive and negative to go clockwise or counterclockwise. Now this is good, but you'll notice the performers aren't on the grid. So you want to go through and try to find a way to chart it so that they're on the grid. If that doesn't matter to you and you're fine with just rotating it this way, obviously you can accept it. What's nice about the rotate tool, like I said, is that it does chart a curved path. If you see that, I pulled up my adjuster tool so you could kind of see everyone's paths, keeping that interval open. So what is the difference? How does it look? Let's rotate it a little bit further. So right now we have these guys rotating 180 degrees and you can see their circular paths. This is what the form looks like when they rotate. All the intervals here stay open and the performers are meant to do a curved path. So how is that different from just charting it this way? Well, I'm going to hit my push tool and it's going to straighten out all the paths. Now look at the pathways. So we know that that form is going to condense and then open up. Okay, now that doesn't concern you if that's not a big deal. then that's fine. Chart it that way, okay? But you have to communicate with your directors and the people that you're working with, because they might want the circular path. So if you did the circular path version, you'd probably also want to do this. Let me go back. You'd probably want to do the rotate tool, and then you'd want to select people, or at least maybe select the endpoints. These are just little tips here, and then say arrow, create arrows from paths, and you'll get this little arrow for everybody that goes in. And that way, when the instructor or the teacher is teaching it, they can say, guys, I want you to come out and around to your spots to take a curved path so that the intervals stay open the whole time. Those are just little pro tips of mine, just to throw them out there. Next up, I have a whole separate video on this tool, but I'll just quickly run through it. This is the follow the leader editing tool. Now, it matters how your performers are glued and pasted together. In my case, they are glued from left to right, with the leader being over here because this person's green. It follows the leader in the way that you click it. And you can always put your stride in. So if you want them to go this way, but you want them to take a 12 to 5, it'll show you how far they would go if you took a 12 to 5 step. So there's a couple little nice things in here that can help you to keep, make sure that you're using the correct stride. There's also some mirroring. This is if you have two separate lines and you want them to go in different directions. But certainly you can play with that. Usually when I'm animating my drill, I'm doing it one line at a time. But it doesn't mean you can't use those functions either. Also, you can do a curve shape so that it kind of curves around, so it's not exactly forward 8 over 8. You can make just a curve form. So that's really nice when you're doing curvilinear drill and you want a big kind of sweeping curve to go gently around a corner as opposed to straight lines hitting corners and that sort of thing. All right, next up is the track tool. Now, the track editing tool is a little bit different than the push editing tool because it allows you to move big groups of people in unison, but in multiple directions. So I'll show you what I mean. When you click it, you can use your arrow keys on your keyboard, or you can just click on the grid with your mouse. So if you wanted this line of people to go forward and then left, they could do that. Click off curved path and it'll hit corners like this, or you can have them curve and have them kind of do a sweeping curve. So it's a great tool for when you want large groups of performers to move in unison in more than one direction. The final tool we're going to look at, I have a whole another video just on this tool alone, but we'll stick it in there since it's part of this this 8 group, is the Stagger tool. Now the Stagger tool, you have to create the form that you're going to first. So let's move these guys this way. They're going to come down. And then from here, you go to your Stagger tool. And you want to think about how many counts you have and how many performers you have and how you can step off in a ripple. So you could step off every 1 step. But since I've got 15 performers, this last guy is not going to step off till the 15th count, giving that person 15 and 16. So they're not going to be able to make that. So you could do group sizes. Let's say they could step off in groups of 2. So now however they're glued, like this one's from left to right, 2 people will step, 2 people will step, 2 people will step. So if we did this, 2 people stepping off every count, you'll probably get it. So let's try that first. So there's a little bit of trial and error with this. 2 people, 2, 2, and you'll notice they step off in a ripple. And then they'll all halt at the same time. Okay, now that's something that you can change as well. I'm going to make this a little bit smaller of a motion, and I'm going to do this. Step off every 1 count, groups of 2, but I'm going to do drop off every 1 count. Drop off is where they halt, and so we want them to halt in a ripple. Now let's check it out. Now they've got to really move to get there if they want to drop off in one count. So what you have to do now is go back and play with it again, group size 2, step off every 1, and then do this. Make it an 8 count duration, and you'll get a rippled halt as well. So as soon as they go 8, halt, 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 halt. So that's a way to do it. You kind of play around with exactly who steps off, who halts, and that sort of thing. And then your next step, of course, is coming up with a way to show the client how to teach that. So adding arrows or selecting people on the page to say these two go, these two go, these two go, or writing it down in the production sheet. So that's kind of tricky. So these tools right up here are kind of these modifiers of forms that are already created and can help you to animate things properly without having to use tons of subsets. So I really recommend you get comfortable with these because they can save you a lot of time in your writing and create the kind of animations you're looking to show your clients. So I hope this was helpful to you. Please like and subscribe to my channel if you like these Pyware videos.